Hello, good morning. Welcome again to another episode of Straight Talk with Daily Tribune. I'm Teddy Montelibano.
I'm Chito Lozada. With us today is an individual treading the world of financial technology, or fintech in short, as an innovation consultant specializing in blockchain, AI, and Web3.
His clients, startups. His clients include startups, tech conglomerates such as Union Bank, UBX, universities, Ateneo, and entrepreneur organizations.
Will take us to the virtual world.
With that said,
Let's welcome
Santiago
Arnaiz.
Arnaiz. Yeah,
Welcome to
Santiago,
the show.
Thank you guys.
welcome to the show.
Happy
Santiago
to
was
be here.
also he took up his master's in Columbia, investigative in journalism,
Journalism, right?
and you wanted to become an investigative journalism.
Yeah,
Or an investigative journalist,
yeah.
rather.
I
Journalist.
specialized in multimedia investigative journalism. Came to the Philippines. Came back to the Philippines.
Yeah, which
I
is
should say.
unusual because some Filipinos who study abroad would like to have would like to taste working in the U.S.
Yeah,
or abroad, obviously. But you wanted to come back right away.
I did. No, it's funny actually because while I was in New York, the entire year, it was 2016, right? So you can imagine it was a flashpoint in global politics, and one of the epicenters that was here in the Philippines. Everyone's talking about
The elections.
the elections, and then the immediate early years of the administration. And so there's a lot of attention in the Philippines. So the entire time I was in journalism school, I was the ambassador of the Philippines there to the journalism
Oh, that's
community
good.
there. So I realized now the Philippines is really, I guess, it was my first realization that the Philippines really is in the global spotlight for things like politics. And as we know, technology played a big role as well, and data analytics played a big role in the elections in 2016. So especially social media, right? So there was a lot of global attention in the Philippines. I felt, actually, if I want a real opportunity, I should go home and then explore those
Good
stories.
thinking, yeah.
So that kind of transitioned into from investigative reporting, naturally transitioned into tech reporting.
Okay.
Because the Philippines really is a global, again, epicenter of technology innovation.
You think so? We are.
Definitely. I mean, it's not just in terms of the companies, the tech companies in the Philippines, but also the tech talent. I mean, we have some of the most in-demand tech talent, right, and innovators in the world.
Sad that we're not benefiting from it.
Sadly,
right.
we don't seem to be benefiting.
We're losing
from
Yeah,
this.
it's an incredible brain
other-
drain. Tama?
yeah.
Yeah.
The
There's a
other
brain drain that
countries.
happens. No? Some of the best talents coming from our university systems, even
sucked
vocational
up, yeah.
schools. They get
Get picked up
up
abroad,
by
yeah.
Amazon, by Google, by Facebook, and then they get offered 10 times the salary to work for these foreign companies that local companies can't compete. So I mean, it's a good thing for the individual, but not so good nothing for the country.
We were starting. We were before the show. We were talking about startups,
Yeah.
which you're involved in. I mean, you're very much involved in. What would you? Could you?
Yeah.
Can you just encapsulate what we're talking about?
Yeah. So when I first started my journalism career in the Philippines, there was a real gap in reporting on startups. So I'm talking about, I mean, as recently as 2017, I took over the operations of a digital newsroom covering startups.
Yes.
And very quickly realized that on the one hand, a lot of startups, and we'll define startups as, say, early stage innovative companies. Just call it that now. Startups didn't, the last kind of priority for a startup after fixing product, getting it to market, raising funding. The last thing is to hire a branding guy or a marketing person. So, and lalo na, a PR person. So their ability to engage with media was very low. Continues to be.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, traditional media has a very difficult time covering startups also because it's such a gray area, right? What is a startup even?
Yeah.
Right? What does that mean, right? And what does it mean to raise a seed round, a series A, a B, C, right? D, E, goes to F, right? So it's like, what's this alphabet soup, right? So as journalists, and I count myself among journalists, it's difficult to cover, and so there was just this gap in the coverage of startups. So that's where I focused for a while. and then from there transitioned into working in startups. So over the pandemic, switched over, started running a health data analytics company.
A what?
Health data analytics company.
Health data analytics.
Yeah,
What
so-
was that? What is that?
Working with, let's say, hospitals or businesses to analyze the information, the health information, wellness information of their patient
Yes.
communities, their employees, and then to give them insights into that so they can make strategic decisions, right? So it's one of a number of different health tech innovations in the country, and so did that, moved around this space, and then started specializing in some new technologies like AI, blockchain, and Web3. We can get into that if you'd like.
Very
but-
technical.
Yeah, but we
Can
could.
you
but-
reduce it into layman's
but,
terms?
yeah, but I mean, the long story short really is because I was covering startups, I became really, really interested in what not just the technologies being developed, but the mindset of the entrepreneurs, right, in the startup scene. So I really stuck around. Realized as well, again, going back to what I said earlier, there is a gap. Again, there's a gap of people in startups who were media savvy, who understood how to communicate the innovations they were bringing to the market. So that's where I built a practice in consulting, and then that's where I kind of continue until now.
Did it come to you naturally? I mean, the technology field is far different from journalism.
Yeah, no, it is.
Did it come to you? Yeah,
You have
naturally,
he has
because
a knack of
my first encounter with this person, I was a political journalist, so he was very interested in politics. So I was sort of giving him an orientation
when
about
is this?
Philippine history a long time ago. That
Pretty
was
long ago, yeah.
2010. 2010 ba?
when he was
Yeah.
when he was 10 years old.
When he was still here. When he was still here, he was graduating from the Ateneo.
Yeah.
So and then all of a sudden, he started speaking in a language that I really I couldn't decipher.
Well, to answer your
Alien
question,
language.
But then, my involvement in, now I've really been into
Yeah.
politics. All of a sudden, I was asked to do this business thing. Boy, the resistance was, business
sure.
and me.
I'm sure. Well, to answer your question, did it come naturally?
Yeah, they did. I'm a natural.
I think, and you guys will relate as journalists as well. In essence, the job of the journalist is to enter a field that maybe you don't understand, identify who are the experts, talk to those experts, right? Gain a functional understanding of the field, and then be able to communicate that in layman's terms to whoever your audience is. That's really what a journalist does. And as a tech communicator in the startup field, it's the same. You go into, let's say AI, right? I know nothing about AI. I come into the field, I figure out who do I need to talk to understand this, and then now that I understand it, how do I communicate that to a broader market? So it's I think actually the skill set is pretty transferable.
We were also talking about the history of startups. We were talking about
Yeah.
Stanford and all that.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah, could you give us an idea about how, how startups are, how did it originate? How is it in the Philippines? Are we making headway or in terms of
Yeah.
startups? Or what?
Well, that's a pretty broad question.
like, for example, what big companies right now came from startup
Yeah.
company.
So I mean, there are many examples globally, right? So very storied examples of Microsoft and Facebook being born out of garages in California.
Okay.
They had humble beginnings, and then they kind of catapulted into these global, world-changing companies.
Yes.
Apple, a very storied career of Steve Jobs, right, in launching Apple from, again, small company.
Garage,
What's reshaping the way that we communicate, the way that we engage with each other, right?
Locally, can you think of some
Yeah,
companies?
so I was going to say locally, we don't have the same kinds of stories,
Uh-huh.
just because our startup community is so much younger. So we have a lot of very promising startups, right? So let's say Kumu. Kumu is a live streaming platform for a long time. I don't know if it still is, but it was the #1 app in the Philippines.
I encountered Kumo in
Kumu,
Boracay
yeah,
Yes.
it's
the pandemic.
been
Yeah, there you go.
with the guys who founded it, and I couldn't
They've been
understand what it
using
was.
that.
Yeah, Roland, and I mean, they're very, very cool guys.
You guys,
And
and
so-
Vicky Herrera also.
Vicky's
was there, yeah.
fantastic. Yeah, she's back in publishing now.
Yeah, I
No,
know.
so there are a number of interesting startups. Obviously, they haven't had enough time to reach the kind of same status as larger platforms from the US, but it's there. But unfortunately, I think these are exceptions that prove the norm. They're standouts because it is such a difficult environment here in the Philippines. It's changing for the better, but it has been historically a very difficult environment for startups to grow. So we don't have as many successful, innovative young companies that get the kind of traction that they might elsewhere.
We're talking of lack of interest among capitalists or
it's
government assistance.
It's a very interesting kind of multifaceted problem. I think the best way to break it down when it's like, who are the stakeholders involved, right?
Okay.
So you have the startup, and they exist in an ecosystem, and there are many stakeholders involved in that ecosystem. In the States, if you want to go back, you're talking about Stanford now and the origins of Silicon Valley. It's a very interesting story that I'm sure the Tribune community can look up as well. But in the early days of Silicon Valley, out in California, in Palo Alto, this was during the Cold War era, right? So before my time.
For our time as well. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm well read, not so much.
Yeah. Now the Department of Defense in the U.S.
The Department of what?
Defense.
Defense Department.
Yeah.
Okay.
Pulled in a lot of funding, funneled a lot of funding capital into universities like Stanford, which at the time were technical universities. It wasn't like the Ivy League level institution it
MIT.
was today. Yeah, it was actually very specifically they chose Stanford because it was an engineer. It had a very strong engineering school, but they were very underfunded. It was not yet the Stanford it is today, but they funneled the money there in order to incentivize young talents, engineering talents, to create innovations that would give the U.S. a leg up, right, in this technological arms race, right? And interestingly enough, you brought up MIT. I believe Stanford did not have the facilities necessary to create some of the technologies, so they had to squat out of MIT's facilities in order to do some of the experiments they were running. And because there was so much money being funneled into Stanford to create these technologies, it gave birth to fantastic technologies that, because then Stanford partnered with private institutions, gave birth to your Boeings, Lockheed Martin, right? All of these massive companies today that run essentially the transportation and the aerospace industry. So what you see there, the dynamics there, are the government providing funding and incentives, the private sector creating channels to market, and then you have the university as the kind of central point, bringing young talents into this infrastructure and creating this incredible kind of forge for startups. And then you fast forward to today, and Palo Alto and the region surrounding Stanford is the global kind of epicenter. It's the mecca of startups, right? Now there are many communities like that around the world. Silicon Valley continues to be the global standard.
Okay.
In the Philippines, we look at the stakeholders involved. It's different, but those core players still need to be there. The public sector, providing funding and incentives. The private sector, providing partnerships and channels to market. And then this is where we're only starting to develop the universities playing a enabler role in creating these kind of startups. So,
Which university is
so
inside the university?
yeah, if you look at any
academic institution in the country.
Yeah, so if you look at any major university naman in the Philippines, there's going to be some sort of program
The science
for this.
yeah.
So
Science
UP has an accelerator, LaSalle has DLSU has an accelerator, Ateneo, where I worked with them recently, is revamping a long-standing business accelerator program to be more to create more investable startups. So it's a very robust program now, led by an associate of mine, Aya Laraya. And
What's the name of the girl?
Aya Laraya.
Aya Laraya.
Yeah,
Laraya.
yeah. He's the new head of the SOMBA program, the School of Management Business Accelerator. And what's unique about this SOMBA program is they're pulling students from different schools in Ateneo. So from the School of Management, from the School of Humanities, the School of Science and Engineering,
Different colleges,
right?
yeah.
Social sciences, to bring together all these interdisciplinary perspectives to create a business, right? Because it takes that many perspectives to run a business. Right? It can't just be a bunch of finance kids, right?
What's coming out of it? What's coming out of there? What kind
Well, it's
of
fairly
business?
new. It's fairly new, so we'll see, right? Like I said, it's a very young, it's a very, very young ecosystem still. So, we'll see.
The private sector is involved. Is there a private sector factor there?
There is a private sector factor, and we can get involved. We can get more into that. But I think again, the core dynamic that's forming, mirroring now finally what was happening back in Silicon Valley many years ago, decades ago, is you have the public sector supporting these universities and creating these programs.
What does government budget? Is there budgetary from the
Oh,
government?
we can get into that, right?
Yeah.
There is
Just take
budget.
it.
We'll see if it gets deployed, where
How
it
do you
gets
see
deployed.
the
There
role
is.
of the government in this?
Yeah, there is, and we can dive into the government's role. And you have the private sector supporting these startups as well, and the universities creating the educational kind of bedrock for these students to become entrepreneurs, right? So hopefully this pans out. I mean, it's very promising.
Yeah.
We'll see, and then maybe when we have
German on stage.
yeah, and then
Yeah.
and when we have time, maybe we can dive into some specific stories as well.
So before we dive into that, we are taking a commercial break.
This is the
This is-
fastest.
Yeah, it's kind of we're
Ah,
riding
we need a
roller
part
coaster.
2 and part 3 for this. My goodness.
Happy to swing by again. Yeah.
Okay, we're taking a break right now.
Yeah, what?
Nagtitiis ka na lang ba sa e-wallet at lumang bank apps mo?
Struggle! I can't receive payments na.
I need to go to the bank branch to deposit a check pa.
Sinila na. So hassle to do it one by one. I need to send my bank deets again and again.
Tiis no more! With UB, hindi ka na mahahassle, hindi ka na magsistruggle, at hindi ka na magta-travel pa to the bank branch to transact. Ayos? Ayos! Download Union Bank online now.
Nasa kamay mo ang swerte, ngunit hindi ito isang laro na para lang sa iyo. Dahil bukod sa pag-asang maging milyonaryo, ang pagtangkilik mo sa loto at ipapang produkto ng PCSO ay nakakalikom ng pondo para sa mga programang pangkalusugan, tulong at serbisyong medikal at kawang-gawa.
Lahat ng minimithi makakamtan sa PCSO.
With Globe, our steps can lead us to millions of doors opening, millions of paths unfolding, and millions of reasons to keep going. Now's the time to be with a network that gets better every day for you.
So Ted, we're back. And,
So we're back. Talking with Santiago Arnaiz.
Arnaiz.
Tiago, you were talking about what something's happening in Ateneo.
I mean, Ateneo is one of the universities that are creating these programs. I think
What program is that again? Can you refresh
these
me?
like business accelerator programs,
Okay.
incubator programs. Really, end of the day, we can get the naming out of it. It's really just a meaningful program that creates startups that are worthy of being invested in.
Okay.
Right. And so again, Ateneo is one of them. It's one I think I have most insight into. But really what's happening is there's an emphasis on not just education, but a really like practical roads in infrastructure towards getting invested in, creating products that aren't just good on paper, but actually make money.
Yeah.
So an interesting thing that's happening at Ateneo is they're figuring out ways to allow these startups, the students, to actually sell their products and services while they're in school pa lang.
Yeah.
That way, you can really test. By the time you graduate, you have 2-3 years of revenues already. And so if I'm an investor, I'm happy to plop my money in here because there's proven track record, right? So that doesn't exist in the country. It exists elsewhere, in other countries, but here it's a pioneering program. So it's very exciting.
Pioneering. And are business enterprises are they alerted? I mean, are they interested in it?
Yeah.
Are they looking at it?
In terms of
It's
investing in
it's
those,
very new, no? But I mean,
programs.
when you have a university like Ateneo or UP, DLSU, announcing these programs, people pay attention, right? And so, interesting you mentioned this. The conglomerates that kind of run business here in the Philippines are paying attention to these programs, and they're paying attention to startups in a major way. And I think this doesn't exist in the same way in the U.S., so it's quite unique in the Philippines. It's not fully unique in the Philippines, but they're major players in the Philippines in ways that it's not the case elsewhere. I'm talking about conglomerates and the role they play in the startup community here in the Philippines. Right now, it's a double-edged sword now, I'll be very frank about it. You have a lot of conglomerates that are entering the startup scene as enablers, and that's a very good thing because these conglomerates have access to markets, they have access to the general consumers. So if they partner up with a startup, for example, that startup gets incredible access, an opportunity to bring their products in front of millions of people in a way that they would not otherwise, right? So that partnership is crucial. Also extends the resources of these conglomerates to the startups, right? What the conglomerate gets them out of it is they're able to, let's just say they outsource their R&D, their research and development, right? Instead of innovating in-house all of these technologies, these new practices, and getting or just waiting around to get disrupted by an innovator, they partner up with a young innovative company and they scale that technology across their conglomerate. So the best innovative minds in conglomerates right now are doing that. So you see it around. The Gokongways are doing that. So Lisa Gokongway is doing that with Kaya Founders, which is a very prominent player in the startup scene. You see the C family supporting Gentry Fund, which is a venture capital fund. Many examples, right? So of course Ayala through Globe, and they have their own funds as well.
Voices.
Yeah, the Boitis do as well, right? So I mean, there's a lot. There's a lot of attention being funneled here. Now, I wouldn't say fear, but what we need to guard against, though, and to be fair, there are not many predatory players yet. But what we do need to be mindful of is the fact that it is very possible as well in these kinds of situations that a powerful entity sees a potential threat to their business and they invest in it only to then roll out their own version and then kind of snuff out the innovation, right? There are stories out there, without having to name names, there are stories of that happening already. So it's unique in the Philippines. Luckily, the general mindset is collaboration, innovation, partnership. but that's the optimist in me talking, right? So,
That's the nature of big business, to quench the competition. Di ba?
right, right.
Yeah. So how can you guard? And then you say we have to guard against it. How
Yeah.
do we guard? For instance, how do we guard against it?
Yeah,
Would the
yeah.
government has I think the government should have a role in that.
That's exactly right, Chito. So two things. Now going back to the role of the university is to educate these entrepreneurs, these founders, and make sure that they're equipped, that when they get to the negotiating table, they know what they're negotiating, right? Because let's say I were a fresh grad from Ateneo, fresh out of this, fresh out of my thesis, and I have this great idea, and I want to get it in front of a venture capitalist. I know my business. I know very little else. Sitting across me on the negotiating table is someone whose entire job is business and finances. So, and we're supposed to have an equal negotiation. Doesn't make sense, right?
Yeah, of course.
It's not possible. So, the role of the university is to really equip these students,
Okay.
right? With
Equip them with
the
a sense of making business.
with the entrepreneurial sense to be able to have those negotiations, right? With the confidence to be able to negotiate, right? And with the with the nuance that what am I offering when I sell part of my business? What exactly am I offering, and for how much, right? The ability to establish a value to my business. These are the things that the university can do. And to your point, the government also needs to play a very active role in setting up regulations, because right now, as with many things, the Philippines is still the Wild West.
Yeah.
A venture capitalist can come in and make whatever offer they want, really. There are very little protections, right? And vice versa. An entrepreneur can make a lot of promises and not deliver, and there's not a lot that can be done about it. So standards need to be established. Regulations need to be established. A standard operating procedure needs to be kind of laid out that everyone kind of knows exactly how this runs. In the US, they put a term sheet down, which is, here's the agreement. There's an understanding that everyone kind of knows how this is going to work, right? How this is going to go. In the Philippines, that's not the case, not yet. So, the government plays a role in establishing how exactly the terms of engagement need to go.
Yeah, the way I see it is that the government hasn't caught up with the sense of well, that's technology that which it's not
Well, DOST is there.
Yeah,
No,
so
the-
that's right. So to be fair to the government, they're playing a really active role as well, and have been for a while. So there's the Innovative Startup Act. I believe this was of 2016, and I mean, don't quote me on that. But it was in 2016 when they launched more support for startups. So this was a promise of funding, of, let's say, tax considerations to make sure that innovative startups that qualify get all the resources they need to succeed. So that's from the government. There's also a lot of efforts from the DOST, the DTI, right, the ITC, to support programs like Kubo, for example, or Idea Space Kubo, which is in itself it's one of those accelerator incubator programs, the ones that are trying to ready innovative ideas, turn them into businesses, viable businesses.
them into
That's a
businesses.
collaboration between multiple government agencies and Idea Space, which is from the MVP group, right? So that's another collaboration. So the government is playing a big role, and interestingly, there are agencies in the government that are also trying to adopt new technologies like blockchain to accelerate processes, to create more transparency. So these initiatives do exist.
When you say create blockchains, can you reduce that to layman? What exactly is that? I hear that word. It's being
Blockchain.
bandied about. I mean,
Yeah. So in very plain terms, blockchain is a technology that allows for immutable records, which is to say, record keeping that you cannot tamper with. It's tamper-proof, a tamper-proof ledger system. Let's call it, right? There are many different components there, but the idea essentially is it takes the kind of central record-keeping function of like a bank, for example, or a government agency that's it's tracking transactions. It takes them out of the picture because the technology itself can manage it on its own.
okay.
So there are many different applications of blockchain, but the idea is, for example, in government, for example, if you look at BIR, Instead of the BIR spending incredible resources towards tracking all of these transactions, you have a technology that can do it for you and do it transparently. So if I, as a taxpayer, want to look up exactly how much I owe the government, it should be there. You know, I should be able to look it up. So I mean, there's a lot of promise for these technologies. But
The president seems to be, the current incumbent,
Yeah.
he seems to be very keen on digitalization.
Yes.
I mean,
Digitalization.
is that going to be, push the country forward in terms of beating corruption, in terms of transparency and all that? And do you think do you think he's sincere? I mean,
Say
in
it.
terms of actually,
Right.
giving meat to the words, you know what I mean?
yeah. I mean, speaking to the sincerity of the president, I mean, I cannot say, right? I don't.
Let's presume he is.
Yeah, but I mean, but of course, I mean, best.
What
That's
are
a,
the
like,
manifestations of that?
assumption.
The best case, right?
He's
Of course,
sincere.
is he is, right?
The
And
best case is what?
best case is that he is sincere. And if you
Yes,
look at
yes.
the programs being launched and you look at the people, being put into these key offices, it's very promising. To be honest.
There are manifestations.
Of course,
that. Okay.
right? And but two things, right? One, it's I've been talking about how the government plays a really clear key role in enabling innovation in the country, right? Not just for startups, but also for conglomerates to adopt new technologies like blockchain.
And also for SMEs. Is that-
And SMEs, of course, right? So businesses across the board, the private sector, the government plays a key role in allowing innovation to happen, to flourish. For a while, there were a lot of restrictions around, let's say, adopting blockchain tech because the government didn't understand it, which is fair. Very few people do, right? But now they're taking on a more, hey, let's innovate together. Let's work together, right? You have private sector playing roles in shaping regulation, right? It's a more of a conversation and dialogue because there's an understanding that if we collaborate and work together, the Philippines as a whole can flourish.
So that's
with
now
these
happening.
technologies. So that is happening, right? And so it's good. It's good that the government's more open to innovation. On the other hand, I was on a panel with Jeremiah Belica from ARTA, right,
yeah.
the Anti-Red Tape Association, and he had a fantastic point, which he said that the pace at which governments move are often counter to innovation. Governments have to move intentionally slow because
They have to move
intentionally
intentionally slow, which makes a lot of sense when you think about
Why?
who are the people they are protecting. Because if you move at the speed of innovation, there's a lot of cracks and a lot of gaps that are left behind, right? There's this mindset among startups of fail fast and fail often, because you learn from those mistakes and you innovate. In a startup, it makes sense because really worst case scenarios, you lose some money, right? But for a government to fail fast and fail often, you're talking about lives and livelihoods. So there needs to be a very intentional growth path. So governments are in this have this balancing act of, I need to adopt new technologies, I need to innovate, we need to do things better, but we need to make sure that people aren't hurt in the process, don't get left behind in the process. So
You think our government is conscious of that? I mean, that kind of mentality.
I've seen it.
Are they aware that they shouldn't move as fast as innovation?
I mean, I've seen it. I've seen that kind of mindset. I mean, I'm quoting now a government official who said this.
Of
right?
Belica.
Right. So,
Belica.
yeah. So I mean, he's fantastic.
Okay. I'm
Fantastic
sorry.
guy. So
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
there are many innovative minds in government who recognize as well the responsibility of being in government, which I think is a very good thing. But that's also why you need to have multiple perspectives here. The government looking out for the greater population, right? Make sure that all innovation is inclusive. Then you have the private sector that champions and spearheads innovation. Then you have the education sector that makes sure that we have innovative minds joining this ecosystem. That there's a baseline understanding of how things should operate. That the playing fields are equal. So.
No, okay. I don't think we have a lot of time now. left. But I just want to know before we run.
We'll have enough. Yeah.
Yeah. I want to know what do your mind. I mean, are you familiar with with some of the innovations that are being done by entrepreneurs, especially young entrepreneurs. Are you familiar with? You're familiar with young entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
What kind of tools or technological
And
tools
their
are they using,
mindset.
or innovative tools that they're using to get ahead of the competition? Are you aware of?
Yeah. I mean, I think one big community right now in the Philippines that it's really worth paying attention to is the Web3 community.
Okay.
What is Web3?
Yeah, Web3 is an evolution in. It's an evolution from the internet. I mean, not to get too technical about it, but I'll focus na lang on what the innovation is.
Yeah,
Right.
okay.
It's this ideological movement towards empowering communities as opposed to centralized gatekeepers. So in very practical terms, it's something akin to instead of having a central body that manages an entire community, like a government, for example, right? You have technologies that allow communities to govern themselves.
Oh, great.
Right. So that's the general gist of what the Web3 community is like. And interesting about the Web3 community, it started out largely with video games. Mobile games. So if you guys are familiar with Axie Infinity, it was this mobile game where people, by playing, could earn cryptocurrencies, and then they can convert that into actual pesos. And you had these really awesome stories of far-flung provinces, people using those tokens that they earn from the game to buy things in the sari-sari store.
How do you convert it into cash? Who gives you the money?
There's,
Who do you sell it?
There's a marketplace online. There are many marketplaces online where you can buy and sell these tokens. So-
E-wallets already adapted.
That's right. Gcash now has
Gcash,
crypto to support this. But from that initial boom, the Philippines became the global kind of hub for Web3 and crypto.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Of those
Global
like
hub.
of the crypto wallets, right? Let's say MetaMask is the number one. The Philippines has the most number of MetaMask holders in the world.
Is that so?
MetaMask. It's like an
MetaMask.
e-wallet for cryptocurrencies,
Yeah.
right?
Okay.
So the Philippines is the leader
Wow, really?
in that case, and so I think it's a very interesting space to look at
I know
because
what-
you have all of these very tech savvy Filipinos that are
That's an advantage.
innovating the space, that are really passionate about it, and are leading the way globally. So if the government, if universities, if all of
Can
these
tap
different
on that.
stakeholders can support that innovation, I think we're in a really great space in the global stage.
Yeah. That must have been written about it.
Well, more can be written about it. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I just heard about it. I mean,
Well, I guess that's part 2 and part 3 of this conversation.
Well,
diving
I
into
know, I
that.
know.
Yeah, unfortunately, we don't have enough time. Maybe we can have a part two?
Yeah, can have a part 2 and something.
next week, maybe.
We'll make it happen.
So,
Great. I mean, how busy are you nowadays? Very.
Happy, yeah, happy to.
But you
to
work
with
anywhere, no?
Yeah, happy to.
That's
have-
one thing about
that's why he's happy. Works everywhere.
he's working
So-
everywhere and making so much money.
Oh, I will see. I mean,
No, Tiago, I'm really happy. I'm really
Tiago.
happy that you joined us today.
yeah.
Yeah, it's
because
an
Us old
experience.
foggies, I mean, we sort of jar our minds about. Yeah, okay.
Well, happy to be here. I'm happy to come back. It was a great
Conversation.
conversation.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah. I hope to
So,
see you back here.
Yeah,
Wrap
maybe
up.
in the near
Wrap up.
future.
Wait, maybe you want to wrap up? I
Yeah.
mean, just what
Maybe
what
you can say
about-
something about the
Yeah, I mean,
how you want the
What
country.
do you want to see? What kind of things do you want to see happen to the country?
yeah, I mean, just
From where you are.
I have nothing to plug personally. What I really want to push forward is that we have a massive opportunity to really put the Philippines on the map as a leader in the Web3 space, as innovators. And what it's going to take for us to do that is support from all sectors: the government, the academe, the private sector, the conglomerates that play enabling roles. There's so many players here, the entrepreneurs. We just have to work together. There has to be a sense of collaboration towards this vision of putting the Philippines back in the frontier, in the bleeding edge. So, my hope is to have more conversations like this where we can keep it layman, keep it accessible, because we need as many people joining the discussion, the conversation as possible. So,
Okay, great.
that's
It's
it.
fantastic.
Fantastic.
Fantastic. I hope you're cloned 15 million times.
More than 50
I hope not.
million.
Come on,
I hope
Filipinos.
not, because then I'm out of a job.
I know.
Yeah.
Okay. So are we? Do you have to say anything? Are we done or what?
Yeah.
Are
We
we still,
have
are
to
we
say
still
our
on, are we still on
goodbyes.
camera?
Yeah,
Yep.
I think
oh my
so.
goodness.
So
Yeah.
this has been an edition of Straight Talk. You can watch us on YouTube and Facebook, Tribune Now.
Okay.
Until next week.
Until
I'm
next week.
Chito
yes.
Lozada.
I'm Teddy Montelibano. Very interesting conversations.